So, hello then, welcome to my final podcast of 2024. Ooh, that feels good to say. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love doing these podcasts, I really do. But I'm ready to have a break, and I always have a break over the Christmas period, and I'm ready to get into that break. But just before I take a couple of weeks break for over the Christmas and New Year period, I of course have to go through my favourite movies of this year, my least favourite films of this year, and the films I am most looking forward to next year. So, let's do it, shall we? Hello there and welcome back to another Night of the Movies podcast. I'm Spy Knight, and in these podcasts I like talking all things movies and TV and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, I'm going through my 5 least favourite films of the year, my top 10 favourite films of the year, and the 5 films I'm most looking forward to next year. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Now, just before I get into my least favourite films and my favourite films of this year and what not, I'm going to quickly give my thoughts on whether this has been a good year in film or whether it's been a bad year in film. Personally, I think it's been a good year in film. Not a great year, but a good year. I think 2023 was a great year in film, and I don't think 2024 was as good of a year in film. In fact, if you asked me this question in September of this year, if you asked me the question before September, should I say, I probably would have said that it was a rather disappointing year in film. But since September, we've got a lot of fantastic movies, and I really do think the tail end of this year has helped save this year in film and make it a good, solid year in film. Again, not a great year, but a good year. And I think anybody who says otherwise isn't watching the right kind of films. You know, sometimes when I hear people say, oh, this has been a bad year in film, I simply think you must be watching the wrong kind of movies. You just must be watching blockbusters. And don't get me wrong, there have been some great blockbusters that have come out this year, for sure. But if you just watched blockbusters, I can understand why you think it would be, why you think that this is a bad year in film. But I don't just watch blockbusters. I watch blockbusters as well as all different kinds of films. And I do think that this has been a good year in film, and anybody who says otherwise isn't watching the right kind of film. So yeah, I think this has been a good year in film. However, there have also been some stinkers that have released this year. And usually when I hear there's a bad movie out, I don't go and watch it. Like when I heard Kraven the Hunter was bad, I didn't go to check it out. When I heard Venom, Let There Be Carnage, or whatever it's called, it's Venom Last Dance, Let There Be Carnage was the second one. When I hear that these movies aren't any good, usually I don't go to watch them. But I go to the cinema at least once a week, sometimes twice, and sometimes maybe even 3 times a week. So in my countless trips to the cinema, I am going to see some bad films. And I did see some bad films this year. So, here is my 5 least favourite films of the year, and just before I get into my list, I want to say that I don't like being negative. I really don't. I don't want to be one of those YouTube channels that is known for just hating on films constantly. And I understand how difficult it is to make a film, and how difficult it is to satisfy the masses with what you are making. You know, it's incredibly difficult to make a film, and I understand that. But this it's just my opinion on the 5 least favourite films. This is just my opinion on what the 5 worst films of the year were. And I also want to say, just before I get into the list, if any films that you love are on this list, please don't take offence to it. Please don't make it seem like I'm trying to make you dislike it. I'm not. You know, I love it when someone loves a film more than I do. But I'm just being honest here, and these are my 5 least favourite films of 2024. So, at number 5 on my least favourite films of 2024 is Deadpool and Wolverine, a film that will probably appear in most people's top 10 of the year list. But personally, this is one of those films that the more I think about it, the more I dislike it. It felt like a bad joke, and it felt like it was this big inside joke with Marvel fans. And I can completely understand why then so many Marvel fans absolutely adored this film and were raving about it non-stop. But I am not a Marvel fan. I've spoken about it at length on this channel in the past. There's some Marvel movies I absolutely adore, like the first Iron Man I think is brilliant. I love the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy, and there's some other Marvel films here and there which I don't mind, but for me, Deadpool and Wolverine felt like a generic Marvel movie that didn't really have anything to say, and it didn't really get the purpose of it. You know, I didn't say this in my review of Deadpool and Wolverine, but as soon as the film finished, my first thought was, what the hell was the point in that? I don't understand the point of the film other than to give Marvel fans some fan service and show some cameos off because, hey look, I'm Ryan Reynolds, and hey look, I've got Hugh Jackman with me, and we're able to get quite a few big stars to be in this film, but I didn't really get the point of it. Plus, the last thing I'm going to say on Deadpool and Wolverine is it doesn't really make a lot of sense when you think about it. The whole sort of idea of the film is that Deadpool has to get this Wolverine back because he's the anchor being for this universe. But then that raises a question, who was the anchor being for Wolverine's universe before Wolverine existed? Because Wolverine hasn't been about forever. So it's like, what is this whole idea with anchor beings? Why is that all of a sudden being introduced? And, yeah, it's one of those films that the more I think about it, the more I don't like. I didn't find any of it funny. I really struggled watching it in the cinema. And I ended up seeing it twice because my mates wanted to go and watch it. And the second time around, I actually found it boring as well. So yeah, that is my fifth least favourite film of 2024. Number 4 of my least favourite films of 2024 is a film I almost forgot existed. A film that I forgot that came out this year. And that film is Abigail, the film all about a ballerina vampire. Whew, I did not enjoy watching this. The performances were bad, and this film's got a lot of acting which I really like, but I thought, yeah, that most of the performances were bad. This film had way too much gore in there, and unnecessary gore at that. There are loads of moments in this film where people keep blowing up and blood is getting splattered all over the place. And I'm like, what is the purpose of this? I don't mind gore and blood in films, especially in horror movies, if there's a purpose to it, or if it's to make the film feel more visceral, you know? But it didn't do that with this film. It just made it feel more, I don't know what I'm trying to get to, but it just made it feel more fake. I suppose that's what I'm trying to say. It made it feel more fake, and I did not find any of it funny. It wanted to be this horror comedy, and granted, horror comedies are difficult to make, for sure. But I didn't find it scary at all, and I didn't find it funny at all. So yes, this was my 4th least favourite film. Abigail was my 4th least favourite film of 2024. And number 3 on my least favourite films of this year is Red One, possibly one of the worst Christmas movies I have ever seen. In fact, not possibly, yes, this is one of the worst Christmas movies I have ever seen because it commits the biggest crime that no Christmas movie should commit, and that is, it didn't make me feel Christmassy. I've spoken about this quite a few times over the past couple of weeks. If a Christmas movie makes you feel Christmassy, it can almost be its saving grace, you know? I reviewed How the Grinch Stole Christmas a couple of weeks ago. That film made me feel Christmassy, so I ended up giving it a positive review. Red One felt like I was cashing in on Christmas in all the wrong ways. It did not make me feel Christmassy. It was not funny. It felt clumsily, is that even a word? But it felt poorly made, is what I'm trying to get to. The filmmaking it felt cheap. A lot of the CGI looked bad, and the film had a budget of something like $250 million, and the film has a budget of that. Your CGI shouldn't look bad, and so much of the film was painful to sit through. All the actors looked bored, and guess what? I was bored watching it. I was bored watching them in the cinema. This was not a good film at all. So yes, Red One was my 3rd least favourite film of 2024. And number 2 on my least favourite films of 2024 is another film I almost forgot existed, and that is Borderlands. You know, when I was writing my notes for today's podcast, I was scrolling through my phone at all the films I'd viewed on this year, and I was like, oh my god, I forgot Borderlands came out. I forgot that film existed. I completely wiped it from my memory, and then I had to try and start remembering things about the film. But I realised every time I did, it made me feel just dirty. This is a repulsive film to watch in the aesthetic and the way it feels, and everybody's miscast in the film, maybe with the exception of Cate Blanchett, but even her I felt was kind of miscast. It's one huge giant mess. It was made by two different directors over the course of like 4 years or 3 years, and you can tell, and in all the wrong ways. And I felt this was a awful film that I wiped from my memory, and I had to think about again when I was doing the notes for this podcast. So, thanks, Borderlands. You gave me one of the worst cinema experiences, and not because of anything in the cinema when I was watching the film, but simply because of the film itself this year. So yes, Borderlands is my second least favourite film of this year. And number one on my least favourite films of 2024 is Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis. Francis Ford Coppola returned to cinema proves that he is not the filmmaker, he is not the director he once was. Sure, there's some nice production design in there. Sure, there are some interesting ideas here and there in the film, but they are only really faintly touched on. This film is one of the worst films I have ever seen, because I sat through it's 3 hour runtime. I'm not sure if it actually was 3 hours. I think it might have been something like 2 hours and a half, but it felt longer. It felt longer than 3 hours. It felt about 5 hours long. I sat through the whole film and I still don't understand what it was about. You know, I still, for the life of me, if somebody asked me what is Megalopolis about, I would simply go, I don't know. I couldn't tell you for the life of me. And I sat through it. Most of the performances were bad in the film, and there are actors in this film which I really like Adam Driver. I've loved ever since I saw him as Kylo Ren in Star Wars The Force Awakens, but he's bad in this film. The film, again, doesn't make any sense, and it goes on and on and on, and there are some laughable death scenes. There's one death scene in particular which I burst out laughing in the cinema, and I haven't done that with a death scene in a movie before, but it was quite something. Yeah, the film is just, I mean, it's a monstrosity. I am surprised that it existed. I'm not quite sure why Francis Ford Coppola decided to make it, but nevertheless he did. And I thought it was, one of the worst films I had ever seen. So yes, those are my 5 least favourite films of 2024. So at number 5, let's go through the list again, is Deadpool and Wolverine. And number 4 is Abigail. Almost forgot about it again, so I had to look at my notes. And number 3 is Red One. And number 2 is Borderlands. And number 1, my least favourite film of this year, is Megalopolis. So, now I've got the negative stuff over with, let's get on to the positive stuff, and let's get on to my top 10 favourite films of this year. But just before I get into my top 10 list, I want to give some honourable mentions. Some films which didn't make my top 10 of this year, but films I still greatly admire. So let's start with the honourable mentions with Emilia Perez. So this didn't make my top 10 list because I watched it again last week on Netflix, and it didn't hit me the same way it hit me the first time when I watched it in a cinema. I was a bit afraid that was going to happen, but I still really like the film. It's very unique, it's audacious, it's this crime, transgender, family drama that also becomes a kidnapping film towards the end, and on top of that, it's a musical, so it's very unique in that way. All the performances were magnetic, the musical sequences were shot in a way that I can't get my head around, and yeah, I thought that Emilia Perez was one of the more memorable films of 2024. Did it totally succeed? No, but you have to admire what it was trying to do. You have to admire that even when it didn't succeed, it was still trying to at the same time. So yes, Emilia Perez is one of my honourable mentions of this year. Another honourable mention from this year is Steve McQueen's Blitz, which showed a different perspective on a World War II drama set during the Blitz, and it showed it on a child's perspective, which I really liked. And my biggest worry going into this film, when I saw it at the BFI Film Festival, was that it was going to feel like a history lesson and be a real slog to sit through. It wasn't. I was completely swept up by it, and I personally thought this was a very emotional film to watch. I really liked Blitz. Another one of my honourable mentions is Young Woman and the Sea. Now, this film is very predictable, and apparently it fictionalises a lot of what really happened, because it's about the first woman who swam the English Channel, if I remember correctly. But I had such an uplifting and inspiring film watching experience watching this movie. I remember coming out of the cinema and I had to spring my step. I wanted to go and run down the lane, you know what I mean? Like, after I saw the film, it just gave me so much life. And I love when a film does that. I'm not saying this is a brilliant film by any means, but it made me feel a way which I hadn't felt about a movie up to that point in the year so far. So yes, I loved Young Woman in the Sea. It was a very nice surprise. Another honourable mention is Beetlejuice. Now, this isn't a brilliant film. I get that. It is not a brilliant film. But it is far better than it has any right to be. This is a film that was over 30 years in the making. You know, the first Beetlejuice, if I remember correctly, came out in 1985. So, what has it been? 39 years, if I've got my maths correct? I'm not great at maths, but anyway, you get the point I'm making. It's been a long time in the making. And I honestly went to this film really worried. I was dead excited about it, but Tim Burton has not made a great film in a good long time. Probably since Big Fish, which came out in 2005, almost 20 years ago now. I was so pleasantly surprised by this film. I saw it twice at the cinema. Both times I had such a great experience watching it. Again, it's not a brilliant film, but for a horror comedy, it does what a horror comedy should do. It freaks you out a bit, it makes you feel a bit uncomfortable in the way any good horror movie should. It scares you, and at the same time, it made me laugh, and it made me smile, and I love watching all these characters back, particularly Beetlejuice. And it's Tim Burton's return to form, at least for now, in my opinion. So yes, another honourable mention for me is Beetlejuice. Another honourable mention, and probably my final honourable mention before I get into my top 10, is A Real Pain. Now, you may be watching or listening to this podcast going, but Spike, A Real Pain doesn't release in the UK until 2025. And you are 100% correct. But I got to see this at not a preview screening. I got to see this at the BFI Film Festival, where it was introduced by Jesse Eisenberg, who stars in the film, alongside Kieran Culkin, who was also there at the UK premiere for this film, which is where I was when I saw it. And I thought this was a very powerful film. I loved watching these characters. Kieran Culkin and Jesse Eisenberg give two performances which are utterly fantastic. Kieran Culkin deserves to get nominated for an Oscar for this film. In fact, he deserves to win. Yes, A Real Pain is a film I won't forget about anytime soon. So, now my honourable mentions are over with. Let's get into my top 10 films of 2024. So, at number 10 is We Live in Time. Now, you might be watching or listening to this podcast and be thinking the exact same thing that I just said regarding A Real Pain. Wait, We Live in Time doesn't actually release in the UK until January 2025. And you are 100% correct. It doesn't release in the UK until January 2025. January, ooh, that's a horrible thing to think about, isn't it? Nobody likes January. Anyway, going back into what I was saying. Yeah, We Live in Time doesn't actually release in the UK until about a month away, you know? But I was lucky enough to see this at a preview screening, and I'm so glad that I did. I was swept up by this film, by its romance, and I'm a big softie, you know. I like a good romance movie. I mean, I like to think of myself as a big softie, and I like to think that I like a good romance film, and I think We Live in Time proves that I do. Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh are perfect together. I did not feel like I was watching them either. You know, they're two prolific actors, and I did not feel like I was watching them at all in the film. I found it to be heartbreaking and very emotional from a personal standpoint as well. Yeah, I loved it. It's not a perfect film, and I understand why it has its problems, but for what it is, I think it's perfect. You know, it's not a perfect film, but for what it is, it's perfect, in my opinion. So yes, We Live in Time is my 10th favourite film of 2024. Number 9 on my favourite films of 2024 is a film which has grown on me a lot since I first saw it, and that is Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. So this was my most anticipated movie of this year, and I was so excited about seeing it, and then I saw it, and I was really disappointed by it the first time I saw it. Then I went to go and watch it again. I was like, okay, no, this is working for me a lot more. Then I watched it again, and I was like, oh my god, I absolutely love this film. I mean, it's not Mad Max Fury Road, but for what it is, I love it. You know, it's this great exploration into the world of Mad Max, and you feel like you were there with these characters, and as a big Mad Max fan, I loved that. Plus, it was a different perspective on a Mad Max story. Like, Mad Max does have a very brief cameo in the film, but he's not in the film. It's not his film. And don't be wrong, I love when, you know, Mad Max is at the centre of his films. You know what I mean? But this time, it's Furiosa, the character that we first met in Fury Road. And I loved how this film followed her character. I loved seeing her upbringing. I loved seeing how tough this character was. I thought the action sequences were nail-biting in the way you want from a Mad Max film. And it gave me all those classic Mad Max feels on the second two times I watched it. And it's one of those films, like I've already said before, that just grew on me and grew on me the more I thought about it. So yes, Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, is my 9th favourite film of 2024. And number 8 on my favourite films of 2024 is Music by John Williams, a documentary, the Disney Plus documentary all about renowned composer John Williams. Now, this probably won't appear on most people's top 10 lists, and that's completely fine, but I am a mega, and I mean mega, John Williams fan. I listen to his music daily. Just this morning, I listened to a bit of music from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and then I listened to a bit of music from Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. I love John Williams' music dearly, and learning about his life, I was completely absorbed in the documentary. I didn't know that he lost his wife just before he became the John Williams we all know him to be now. I didn't know that he was composing Star Wars and Close Encounters of the Third Kind back to back. I didn't know that he was initially rejected by the Boston Pops Orchestra, who he, you know, plays a lot of music with now, because they didn't actually like film music. And he's one of the reasons that film music is considered a great form of music now. I don't know if that's good English, but hopefully you get the point I'm making. He's one of the reasons that orchestras love playing film music now. I mean, like, that's what I got from the documentary. And this documentary doesn't cover all the grounds of John Williams' career, but as a mega... Let's hit my bike there. As a mega John Williams fan, I sat there with the biggest grin on my face, completely swept up by this documentary. I loved it. So yes, that is why Music by John Williams is my 8th favourite film of 2024. And number 7 on my favourite films of 2024 is Challengers. Now, for a long time, this was my favourite film of the year, but then September came along and I saw some other fantastic films. But for a long time, this was my favourite film of the year. And you know what? I think it's the sexiest film of the year. You don't usually hear me say that, but yeah, I think it's the sexiest film of 2024. Really, I do. It's stylishly directed, and there is this chemistry between the main 3 stars that is just so enticing. You can't get enough of it. And I watched it again last week, and it didn't work for me quite as much as it worked for me the first time I watched it in the cinema. But I still loved it. You know, I stuck it on whilst I was wrapping some presents, because we're getting close to Christmas now. I think this podcast is going to be releasing on Christmas Eve, so here we go. We're almost there. We're almost at Christmas Day. I stuck this on whilst I was wrapping some presents, and I had to stop wrapping the presents because I was so into the film all over again. And I stuck it on streaming, where there was adverts. You know, because on Prime Video now, whenever you stream a film, apparently there's adverts. I don't quite sure how that works, and it's slightly annoying. But anyway, you get the point I'm making. I stood on a streaming and I was really into it again, and I love the way it's shot. I love how the film feels like one big tennis match, and for about the 2 hours and 10 minutes that it's on, I just couldn't help but get so into it. And I thought this was going to be a terrible film. I did not like the trailers at all, but I was pleasantly surprised by it. Very pleasantly surprised by it. And so that is why Challengers is my 7th favourite film of 2024. And number 6 on my favourite films of 2024 is Monkey Man. I mean, I tried to sing the Specials. I tried to sing Monkey Man by the Specials there. I think it's by them anyway. I failed miserably. So yes, and number 6 on my favourite films of 2024 is Monkey Man, Dev Patel's directorial debut. I loved this film, and I am tricky with action movies. I get a bit funny when it comes to new action movies. If the action feels generic, if it just feels like you're distant from the action, like you get loads of action movies nowadays which have very well choreographed action in them, for sure. But you feel like, because of the way the action's shot, you feel like you're a bystander watching the action, and I don't love that personally. I don't really like that even. And I went into Monkey Man being like, oh god, hopefully the action's not going to be like it is in so many action movies nowadays. And it wasn't. The action was breathtaking. It was exciting. It was nail-biting. It was in your face, which is what I loved about it. There's so many close-ups during the action sequences are like, oh god, I feel like I'm there actually in the action. I feel like I'm being punched by Dev Patel, and I loved that about it. Plus, there was this energy with the film. I loved how it never really let go of your attention until the very end, and it was just a wild, bonkers, breathtaking film that I have not forgotten about since I first saw it. The experience of watching it in the cinema, I watched it at quite a late screening. I think it was like 8 o'clock when my screening was. And I went into the cinema feeling quite tired. I came out of the cinema, it was about 10:30, maybe even 11 o'clock at night, and I was almost out of breath. I was like, oh my god, I'm so excited after watching this film. And I couldn't get to sleep for like the couple of hours after seeing it, which wasn't the best, granted, but I loved Monkey Man. So that is why Monkey Man is my 6th favourite film of 2024. And number 5 on my top 10 films of 2024 is The Holdovers. Now, you might be watching or listening to the podcast and you might be saying, but Spike, didn't The Holdovers come out in 2023? And if you live outside of the UK, it probably did for you. But it came out in February of this year in the UK, which is slightly odd because it's a Christmas movie. So it was a little depressing watching this in February of this year and being like, oh, this is a Christmas movie, and I've just had Christmas, you know. But since I saw The Holdovers for the first time, I rewatched it about 2, 3, maybe even 4 times actually, now that I think about it, and I just love it. The more I watch it, the more I love it. This is a film which has grown on me in so many ways. It's got this beautifully bittersweet nature to it, and Paul Giamatti's perfect. So is the kid. I forgot the kid's name is, and so is the one who plays the dinner lady. I forgot the actors' names are. They just completely escape me right now. But I loved this film, and I still love it now. And every time I watch it, I'm just so caught up by it. It feels like a film that was made in the 70s, locked in a vault, and they finally got it out of this vault, they put it out, and it just, it's a perfect film. I love The Holdovers. So yeah, that film came out in the UK of this year, so that's why I'm going to put it at number 5 on my top 10 films of 2024. And number 4 on my top 10 films of 2024, and this is a bit of a leap from The Holdovers, but at number 4 on my top 10 films of 2024, as I said twice now, is The Substance. Unforgettable film. Truly unforgettable. I did not know what to expect going into this movie when I went to go watch it at the cinema in September of this year. I thought it was going to be good. I heard some good things about it. I was like, you know what, let's give it a shot. I saw it at a preview screening, or did I? No, I think I had the opportunity, but I didn't. But I ended up seeing it when it came out, like you do with most movies. Don't know why I said that then. Anyway, I saw it when it came out in September of this year. Didn't really know what to expect. I had one heck of a cinema experience watching this film. I mean, if you like body horror movies, watch this one. This film's got a lot of body horror in there that you won't forget anytime soon. There's one moment in the film that has stuck with me in particular where you see Margaret Qualley as a young version of Demi Moore taking this chicken leg out of her stomach. Oh, just thinking about it now, oh god, made me feel queasy, you know what I mean? Oh, yeah, there's so many moments like that in the film, and it was just simply for the cinema experience itself, because it really did feel like an experience. And I always say that the best movies. That's why I put The Substance on this list. I was so, amazed, but also I felt so uncomfortable at what I was witnessing. You have to be a certain kind of person to come up with this film, and I'm not sure if I mean that as a compliment or an insult. I was quite amazed that this film exists. Unforgettable is the one word I'd use to describe it. I think that's the one word I put in the title of my review of the film, actually. So yeah, I loved The Substance. I even loved the end. I know some people who love the film who didn't love the end. I thought the end was perfect. I didn't love it when I first saw the end to the film. I was a bit like, okay, that's an end. I'm not sure if I loved that. It's one of those endings that the more I think about, the more I think, you know what, that's perfect for the kind of film it is. The ending is bonkers with a capital B. And the film won't work for everybody. If you're not into body horror, then I wouldn't recommend this film. And I'm not really into body horror, but I don't know why this film worked for me on a level that I did not expect. The Substance was utterly unforgettable, and that is why it's my fourth favourite film 2024. Number 3 of my favourite films of 2024, and a big leap from The Substance, it is, of course, Wallace and Gromit: Vengeance Most Foul. Now, I can already hear some people saying, but Spike, is it a full-length feature film? Is it 90 minutes? Is it on the same runtime as Wallace and Gromit: The Curse of the Were-Rabbit? No, it's not. It's not 90 minutes. It's an hour and 10 minutes. But that counts in my opinion, and that's why I put it in this list, because I loved this film. It felt like a welcome return to the Wallace and Gromit, to the world of Wallace and Gromit. It felt like a warm hug from an old friend that you hadn't seen in such a long time. The return of Feathers McGraw feels earned with a capital E, and the story itself was surprisingly clever, not in the way I expected it to be, and it felt like it was just a wonderful Christmas present from Aardman Animation Studios. So that is why I put it on number 2 on my top 10. Oh, number 3 on my top 10 films of the year. And it's one of those films, I think, when it comes out on, I think it airs on BBC One on Christmas Day, and it comes out on January the 3rd on Netflix. Do check it out, because I think it's one of those films you just can't help but smile at. And in the end, if a film makes you smile and it gives you this warmth that you haven't felt like in a long while, then you know it's doing something very, very right. So yes, that's why Wallace and Gromit: Vengeance Most Foul is number 3 on my top 10 films of 2024. Number 2 on my top 10 films of 2024 is another animated film, and that is The Wild Robot. This film is not only stunningly animated, the animation in this film feels good, like it's had so much care and attention put into it. It is also powerfully emotional, very entertaining, hugely entertaining, and simply one of the best animated movies I've seen over the past however many years. Maybe for a long time, actually. It might be the best animated film I've seen. Just give this a little bit of thought. It might be the best animated film I've seen since, I don't know, Toy Story 3 or the first Inside Out. Honestly, I loved The Wild Robot. I got so into it. And yeah, I think it's a perfect animated film. I love all of its themes surrounding otherness, surrounding come together, the worst of times, how one person who's maybe not like the other people, maybe not like the other things that live on this island, can bring everybody together. I love all the voice acting, because you can't even tell it's by these famous voice actors. Usually you get famous actors doing voices for films and you can tell, they don't actually sound that different than what they usually sound like in a movie. Pedro Pascal, who plays the Mandalorian, voice of Fox in this film called Fink. If you didn't know it was Pedro Pascal, you wouldn't, Mark Hamill voices a bear. Mark Hamill played Luke Skywalker. I'm a big Star Wars fan, in case you haven't guessed that already, and I couldn't tell that Mark Hamill was voicing this bear. This film is one of those animated movies which I think is going to be remembered for a long time to come, and is a perfect family movie. As is Wallace and Gromit: Vengeance Most Foul as well. But yeah, Wild Robot, stunningly gorgeous animation, and a very emotional story made this into my second favourite film of 2024. And so, let's get into number one, shall we? And I'd be surprised if you didn't know this already. If you're a fan of the channel, which feels weird to say, the idea of me having fans. Ugh. Don't know why, but it just feels weird. Anyway, if you're a fan of the channel, you'll probably guess what I'm about to say already. But if you are not a fan of the channel, first of all, please do like and subscribe down below if you're enjoying this video or podcast, whatever you want to call it. You might be surprised by what I'm going to say now, but, you know, I don't care what anybody says. Number one on my top 10 films of the year, my favourite film of 2024 is Wicked. I love this film so much, and I don't quite understand why. I mean, I do understand why, but I went into this movie with my arms crossed. You know, the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, I'm gonna hate this film. I ended up just being swept up by it. I could not believe how much I was sat there eating up the film from moment to moment, and I think the musical numbers are all belters. I think they're all bangers. You know, all the songs are so catchy. The performances are perfect for the kind of film this is. Ariana Grande is amazing in this film, and I'm not an Ariana Grande fan, but she's amazing in this film. This story was not what I expected, but I love that as well. Oh god, there's just so much about this film which I love to pieces, and I think it's a perfect film. It's, you could say objectively it's not a perfect film and it does have some problems, but to me personally, it's a perfect movie, and that is why I put it at number one. Yeah, it's a proper musical, and I love a good proper musical. And I've seen this film 3 times now, and each time I go into it thinking, okay, it can't be as good as I thought it was the last time around, you know? And then it turns out to be. Yeah, I love Wicked so much, and I can't wait to see its story continue next year. You know, hopefully I'm putting Wicked Part 2, what's it called? Wicked for Good. The title of it came out last week. Hopefully I'm going to put Wicked Part 2 as number one of my favourite film of 2025. Because Wicked Part 1, I think, is just... oh, it's perfect in my opinion. Just perfect. So yes, Wicked is my favourite film of 2024. So let's go through my top 10 films again, and let's see if I can remember off the top of my head, trying to look at my notes. Number 10 on my top 10 films of 2024 is We Live in Time. And number 9 on my top 10 films of 2024 is Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. And number 8 on my top 10 films of 2024 is Music by John Williams. And number 7 on my top 10 films of 2024 is Challengers. And number 6 on my top 10 films of 2024 is Monkey Man. Yeah, Monkey Man. Anyway, and number 5 on my top 10 films of 2024 is The Holdovers. And number 4 on my top 10 films of 2024 is The Substance. And number 3 on my top 10 films of 2024 is Wallace and Gromit: Vengeance Most Foul. And the number 2 on my top 10 films of 2024 is The Wild Robot. And at number 1 on my top 10 films of 2024, my personal favourite film of this year is Wicked. Let's see if I got that right. Oh yes, I did get that right according to my notes. So there you go. And I just want to quickly say as well that I haven't seen every film that came out this year. So there have been a couple of films that I missed here and there. Like I didn't end up seeing Mufasa: The Lion King because it didn't interest me. I didn't end up seeing Kraven the Hunter. You never know, maybe that would have been my favourite film of 2024. Highly doubt that. But I didn't end up seeing Sonic the Hedgehog 3. I didn't end up seeing Heretic, the Hugh Grant film which came out earlier this year. There's been quite a lot of films this year which I haven't had the chance to see, unfortunately. But out of the films I did see, those are my top 10 favourite films. So yes, this is from a personal standpoint, and maybe I'll feel different in about a year's time, but those are my top 10 films of this year as of the day that I'm recording this podcast. As of Christmas Eve, the day that this podcast is probably coming out. So yes, those are my top 10 films of 2024. So, as we are getting to the end of the year, it's time to also look forward to 2025 and look forward to the films that are coming out next year as well. So, here are my most anticipated movies for 2025. Now, I'm going to quickly give an honourable mention before I get into my 5 most anticipated movies for next year. And the honourable mention on my most anticipated movies is the How to Train Your Dragon live action remake. This didn't make the list of my top 5 most anticipated films, but I'm dead excited about seeing it. That trailer that came out really sold me, because before the trailer came out I was a bit like, okay, you know, live action remakes usually don't work. There are some exceptions, like the Cinderella remake isn't bad. I'm struggling after that. I am really struggling after that. But yeah, most of the time live action remakes don't work. But I have faith in this How to Train Your Dragon live action remake. And maybe that's me being naive, I don't know. But the director, the guy who directed the previous 3 How to Train Your Dragon movies, who did such an amazing job, particularly with that first How to Train Your Dragon film, which he co-directed, granted. Co-directed with the guy who directed The Wild Robots, a link to my top 10 list. Anyway, I think he is an amazing director, and hearing him talk about this live action remake, I feel his passion for it. It might not work. It might be another heartless live action remake, but I have hope. You know, again, maybe that makes me naive, but I think this could be something special. I really do. If it's adapted to live action well, fingers crossed we're in for another treat in the How to Train Your Dragon world. So that's my honourable mention on my 5 most anticipated movies it's my honourable mention on my most anticipated movies for next year. So let's get into my list now. Let's get into my 5 most anticipated movies for 2025. And my 5th most anticipated movie for next year is Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. I am a big fan of the Mission Impossible franchise, particularly from the 3rd film onwards. I mean, I really enjoy the first film. The second film, I don't think is nearly as bad as some people make it out to be, but isn't nearly as good as it should be either. The 3rd film, I think, is brilliant. It's my favourite of them. The 4th film, I'm not a huge on, but I don't mind still. I think it's okay. The 5th film, which I think is Fallout, if I remember. No, the 5th film is Rogue Nation. I love Rogue Nation. Fallout, I also loved. And if I remember correctly, number 7 was Dead Reckoning Part 1, which is now not called Dead Reckoning Part 1 because it didn't do too well at the box office. So in order to try and get people to come and watch this new Mission Impossible, basically they renamed the old Mission Impossible film. They renamed Dead Reckoning Part 1 to just Dead Reckoning. And now they're calling this new Mission Impossible film, which is technically Dead Reckoning Part 2, but they've now retitled it to The Final Reckoning, which I find funny. But at the same time, I didn't love Dead Reckoning Part 1. I'm still going to call it that because that's how I know it. I didn't love Dead Reckoning Part 1. But I still really enjoyed it. And the rumour is this is the final Mission Impossible film. And if that's the case, then I hope they go out with a bang. I hope they stick the landing. And the trailer for this film, which came out about a month ago now, if I remember correctly, that trailer looked epic. That trailer looked like classic Mission Impossible. And I love watching Tom Cruise do all these stunts. These movies can be so much fun to watch in the cinema. They can be so much fun to watch, period. Plus, I mean, there's just so much to be excited about a new Mission Impossible movie. And apparently the budget is incredibly high. So fingers crossed it really delivers on all of the spectacle, on all the action set pieces. And fingers crossed it gives us a good fitting end to this franchise. Because I do feel it is going to be the end. Maybe it won't be. Maybe they'll carry on making more Mission Impossible films in the future. But this feels like the end, you know? And I'm really hoping that they go out with a bang. So that is why Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning is my 5th most anticipated movie for 2025. I almost said 2024 there. Still feels weird that we're in 2024 and we're going into 2025, but there we go. Anyway, my 4th most anticipated movie for next year is Avatar Fire and Ash. In other words, Avatar 3. Yeah, Avatar 3. I was about to say Avatar 4. No, we've only had 2 Avatar movies so far. But I'm not a big fan of the first Avatar. I think it's okay. I don't think it's a bad film. I just don't love it as much as some other people do, you know? And I went into Avatar The Way of Water really wanting to love it. And guess what? I ended up loving it. I love Avatar The Way of Water. Granted, I haven't watched it on my TV screen, and maybe I'll feel differently about it if I did watch it on my TV, but watching it in the cinema was an amazing cinema experience. I saw it about 3 times in the cinema, and the film is over 3 hours long. And I'm not saying there aren't parts you could have cut out. I'm not saying that it's the right runtime by any means, but each time the runtime flew by for me, and I was just so absorbed into the world of, was it Pandora, if I remember correctly? I must admit, I'm not a big Avatar fan. I'm not an Avatar stan, if you will. But at the same time, these films give me such an amazing cinema experience, and going to watch another Avatar film next year at the cinema fills me with so much excitement, you know. I can't wait to see the next Avatar movie in the cinema. Plus, it's James Cameron directing, and James Cameron does not miss a beat with his movies, whether it's Aliens, The Abyss, Titanic, the first Avatar. There's another one in there, of course, the Terminator 2 films, the first 2 Terminator films. Yeah, James Cameron does not miss a beat, and I have complete faith that he's going to deliver another unforgettable cinematic experience with this movie. And that's what I want the most from the film. An unforgettable cinema experience, because that's what the best cinema experiences feel like. So, simply for the cinema experience alone, Avatar Fire and Ash is my fourth most anticipated movie for next year. My third most anticipated movie for next year is The Running Man, the new Edgar Wright film starring Glenn Powell. Now, I'm not a big fan of Glenn Powell, so you might be sitting there going, why the hell have you put on number 3 on your most anticipated movies of next year? Well, it's because of the other name I just mentioned, Edgar Wright. Every single film Edgar Wright has made, whether it's Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, The World's End, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, Baby Driver, The Sparks Brothers, and Last Night in Soho, his most recent film, which I think is very underrated, I have absolutely loved. And I love everything Edgar Wright does. I love Spaced as well, which was a TV show he made with Simon Pegg and Nick Frost before they did Shaun of the Dead together. I love Edgar Wright's movies, and whenever he makes a new movie, it feels like an event for me. It probably doesn't feel like that for most people, but it does for me. And I cannot wait to see what Edgar Wright is cooking up with this remake. I have not seen the original Running Man, and I don't know whether I'm going to. I've been deliberating for a while whether I'm actually going to watch the original Running Man film with Arnold Schwarzenegger before watching this remake. I might, but I also feel like I don't want to, because then the film would be completely original to me. And I love a good original film. So, yeah, I am at a loose ends of whether to actually watch the original film or not, but I'm very, very excited for this movie simply because it's Edgar Wright. And Edgar Wright hasn't made a film since 2021, and I want to see what his next film is going to be eagerly. Regardless, whatever it is. It could be about, I don't know, Glenn Powell buying some shoes, and I still think it'll be so exciting to watch, you know? That's one thing Edgar Wright does so well, makes the mundane exciting. And I got a feeling that he's going to do the same thing again here. So that's why The Running Man is my third most anticipated movie for next year, simply because of Edgar Wright. And my second most anticipated movie for next year is Wicked for Good, aka Wicked Part 2. I've already spoken about my love of Wicked in this podcast today, and at length on this channel in the past. So it's unsurprising to say that Wicked Part 2 I'm deliriously excited for, because I do not know the story. This is completely new to me. I didn't say that when I was talking about Wicked before, but the whole story of Wicked is not a story I know about. So I don't know how the story continues post what we saw in the first Wicked, post the end of the first Wicked. You know, I don't know how the story continues, and I've heard from some people that it's a very interesting continuation. I've also heard from some people that it's actually it goes into the story of the Wizard of Oz, and then it shows the story of the Wizard of Oz from the Wicked Witch of the West's perspective. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but because John M. Chu, who directed the first Wicked, did such an amazing job with that film, I have total faith, because he's returning to direct part 2, that he's going to do another amazing job. I really hope he does, because I want this to stick the landing. I don't want this to be another case of It Chapter 1 and It Chapter 2, where It Chapter 2 is such a big disappointment. Yeah, oh God, I hope this film works. I really do. And I'm so excited about it, because I loved the first Wicked so much. So, fingers crossed, Wicked for Good is another banger and continues the story of the Wicked world and sticks a landing with it in the best way possible. So that's why Wicked for Good is my second most anticipated film of 2025. And my most anticipated movie for next year, I've spoken about this film at length on this channel in the past. Actually, have I spoken about it at length? No, probably haven't, but I've mentioned it quite a few times from time to time. And I did my trailer reaction for this film about a couple of days ago now. I was about to say a couple of weeks ago. It feels like a couple of weeks ago now, because the amount of things I've done in the past couple of days. But no, it was only a couple of days ago now that I did my trailer reaction for this film. And if you watch that trailer reaction, I think you'll know what I'm about to say here. My most anticipated movie for 2025 is Superman, the new Superman movie directed by James Gunn. I did not love the trailer, and I still don't quite know what to make of the film and the way it looks. But every time James Gunn directs a comic book movie or a superhero film, he does an absolutely amazing job. The Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy, particularly the first Guardians of the Galaxy film, is my favourite superhero movie of all time. And if he manages to capture that same magic and that same feel that the first Guardians of the Galaxy had, then I am going to absolutely love this film. And I want to feel inspired by this film. I want to feel uplifted by it. And I just want a great modern day Superman film, because I don't feel we've had one. I don't love Man of Steel. I don't really like it, if I'm being honest. And I'm hoping James Gunn makes a classic Superman story with this new Superman film. I am worried, I'm not going to lie, because that trailer didn't sell me personally. But my fingers are still crossed. And I cannot wait to see this film when it comes out on July the 11th next year. I might be on holiday when it comes out, which is going to be interesting, because I'm still going to want to see it. But yeah, I cannot wait to see it. And fingers crossed, again, that it's a good film. I mean, fingers crossed that it's a great movie, because it's got a lot riding on its shoulders. Particularly because it's a Superman movie, and we haven't had a Superman movie since 2013, and that one wasn't any good. So hopefully this one is amazing. Hopefully it's our dream Superman movie. Hopefully. So yes, those are my 5 most anticipated movies for next year. So without looking at my notes again, I'm going to try and relist. I'm going to try and go through the list on my most anticipated movies. My 5 most anticipated movies for next year. So number 5 was Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. And number 4 was Avatar: Fire and Ash. And number 3 was a new Edgar Wright film, The Running Man. And number 2 was Wicked for Good. And at number 1 is Superman. And that is the list of my 5 most anticipated movies for next year. However, I also want to say that I'm excited for the film I don't know about yet. That's going to absolutely stun me. I'm excited for the film that I'm not too excited about yet. That's going to really surprise me, because that's happened a couple of times this year, like with Challengers, which I already spoken about. That was my 7th favourite film of this year, or with Wicked, which was my favourite film of the year. You know, there's this magic with Wicked that I really didn't expect to go with that movie. Movie magic at its finest, in my opinion. And I'm hoping I get that with some movie that comes out this year that I am not excited for at all, and that surprises me in all the right ways. I am excited for the film that I'm not excited for yet, you know what I mean? And I'm also excited for the film I don't know about yet. I didn't really know about Monkey Man coming into this year. I didn't know about The Substance coming into this year. I didn't really know much about The Wild Robot coming into this year. And yet those films all blew me away, and I'm excited to see what films I don't really know about that are going to blow me away next year. Maybe even be in January of next year, because there's some Oscar contenders coming out in January of next year, and yeah, I'm really excited to see what movies do that. So I do have my 5 most anticipated, but I'm also anticipating the film I'm going to be surprised by, and the film I don't know about yet. I'm always anticipating that, because that time, that feeling when you go to watch a film at the cinema that you don't really know anything about. You might know there's a couple of actors in it, you might know who directed it, but you don't really know anything about it, and it completely and utterly turns you on your head. You know, that is an amazing feeling, and I cannot wait to have that feeling next year. But before I get that feeling, I'm going to have a break. So that is it for today's podcast, and that is it for my podcasts in 2024. Got to the end of this podcast finally. It's been a long one, and I am tired, very tired, because of the amount of stuff I've been doing over the past weeks to months to the year, and the amount I've been recording. It does take it out of me, and you know, I love doing these podcasts, but it is hard work as well to actually record the podcast. You plan it first, and then I'm going to record it, then I'm going to edit it, then I'm going to look over the edit. So it is a long process of putting these podcasts out, but it makes me feel like it's worth it. Want to put the podcasts out, and want to start getting comments, and want to start hearing from people about these reviews, about how much they've enjoyed these videos. I don't know how much I'm making sense, because I've been gone for so long, and this is what happens when I do non-stop speaking for so long. I just feel like I start speaking gibberish, you know. I probably am speaking gibberish right now, but hopefully you get the point I'm making. It's a long process making these videos, and yet when I put them out there and they get a mostly good reception, doesn't always happen for sure, but when they get a good reception, it just makes it feel worth it. So I cannot wait to come back in 2025 and make more videos, talk about films, talk about TV shows I loved next year. Didn't talk about TV shows because I haven't watched a lot of TV shows, so that's why I only talked about films in today's podcast. But my favourite TV show of this year would probably be Fargo Season 5, if somebody asked me. So yeah, that's my favourite TV show of the year. A little extra nugget there in the outro for this video, and the extended outro for this podcast today. But yes, it's been a good year on this channel. I've grown a lot on this channel in the past year, and I'm looking forward to seeing what 2025 is going to bring on this channel. I'm not giving up just yet, you know. You haven't got rid of me just yet. I'm going to be going on again next year with this channel. I'm looking forward to doing so, but I'm also looking forward to having this break. So I'm going to round things off once more by saying thank you as always for watching or listening to this podcast, and if you haven't yet, please click down below and like and subscribe on this podcast, and look forward to many more podcasts coming in 2025 on this channel. I'll see you guys again in the new year, but until then, as I already said, thank you as always for watching or listening to this podcast. Oh, one last thing, I had to get the hat on because it's Christmas Eve, so have a very Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year, and I'll see you guys all again soon, but bye for now, bye.